I'm back to talk about another ClockUp visual novel. Last time I talked about Dead Days, but now I'll talk about the one that was released immediately afterwards, The Restless Sheep and the Lone Wolf, a tale of cutthroat love. Actually, in Japanese, Restless Sheep was made before Dead Days, but in English we got them in reverse order. I'm just glad we got them both and so close to each other. That's because Restless Sheep was picked up by the publisher Shirobune, which was surprising to me because Manga Gamer had handled every previous English localization of a ClockUp title. Some people don't seem too fond of Shirobune, but they have published some decent stuff in the English, like Dona Dona and Mark on the Galaxy Dragon. Anyway, how is Restless Sheep itself? I was honestly even more excited for it than I was for Dead Days. That's because it's a crime drama and I usually love those kinds of stories. The whole synopsis sounded really intriguing, even more so than Dead Days. It seemed like the ClockUp title with the most potential to surpass Maggot Bates. I'm always excited to read and talk about visual novels written by Kuroshuki Tetsuya, so let's see if it's as good as I hoped it would be. Cutthroat Love is set in the seedy streets of Kabukicho, a real-life entertainment district in Shinjuku. Our protagonist is a hitman working for a high-ranking Yakuza executive. He suffers from a terrible case of insomnia that makes it so he's unable to sleep until he kills someone. That's why he's a killer for hire, so he can get some sleep and get paid. Also, the protagonist's true name is never revealed. Even in his narration, they usually refer to themselves as me or myself. However, he does have two aliases that others call him by, that being the Japanese name Muraki Takio and the Chinese name Zheng Hexing. I'll be calling him Muraki going forward for simplicity. Anyway, the story kicks off when Muraki discovers a grisly murder at the love hotel he works at between assassination jobs. While the person who died doesn't seem to be anyone too important, Muraki is tasked by his Yakuza boss to uncover who killed him. Muraki soon discovers that the perpetrator is a young woman named Azami with nearly superhuman killing abilities. What's more, he finds out that by having sex with her, he can sleep soundly without needing to kill anyone. Muraki finds himself torn between his newfound connection with Azami, or staying loyal to the Yakuza that are targeting her. This is the basic gist of the plot, but there's more to it than that, like conspiracies against the government and Yakuza schemes. I'll try not to spoil too much. The relationship between Muraki and Azami is the main focus of the narrative. It's a love story at its core that happens to be riddled with crime drama. First thing that I found interesting was the setting. Kabukicho might sound a bit familiar, and that's because it's the place that Kamurocho from the Yakuza games are based on. I'm a fan of the Yakuza or Like a Dragon series, so seeing another Yakuza crime drama set in essentially the same area was interesting. Some elements of the narrative reminded me of the games, but maybe that's because they're both pulling from old Yakuza movies. Speaking of movies, you can tell what movies Kuroshuki likes, considering that Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez are directly referenced. I do think the intros characters have that state their name and status is very Like a Dragon-esque. The game is split into three routes: the Restless Sheep route, the Lone Wolf route, and the True route. The Sheep route is focused on Muraki, going into detail about his past and what led him to becoming a sleep-deprived hitman. The route is also about Muraki going against the mysterious Dharma woman and the Yakuza in order to protect Azami. It's a very strong route that kept me engaged throughout. The Wolf route, on the other hand, is about Azami's past and how she became a deadly killer. Along the way, Azami is being pursued by a detective that will do anything to get to her. While I do love Azami, and the detective character Nair is really cool, I didn't enjoy the route quite as much as the Sheep route. Part of that is just how abrupt the ending felt. It felt less conclusive to me in comparison to the other route, which has a nice epilogue for the main duo. The Wolf route just ends with an H scene, which felt a bit odd to me. The finality in general isn't quite as amazingly climactic. Still, a really good route because of how it explores Azami's character. The final route is unlocked after finishing the previous two. You get an option for it in the main menu. The route takes place a few months after the common route, where instead of going on the adventures of the Wolf route or Sheep route, the couple simply lie low until the rumors causing people to target Azami die down. This True route brings practically all the characters together against the most dangerous enemy, the Japanese government. This route is incredibly brutal and mostly spectacularly written. It was really cool to see characters that were antagonists in previous routes, like Nair and the Dharma woman, in new angles. With everyone coming together, you get to see character interactions you didn't get to see happen before. If I had a complaint about this route, it's how the government conspiracy plot is concluded. It's bizarrely anticlimactic, reminding me a bit of the ending of the Ichi the Killer film, where you think there's going to be a big showdown between the Yakuza and the government, but you don't really get that. Instead you get a surreal scene that's bound to have the reader questioning why it had to be like this. Even I was taken aback by the oddity of the said scene. A generous interpretation of the scene is as purposely anticlimactic to show how unglamorous murder is, and reinforce the theme of how people can kill and die randomly, for seemingly no reason at all. I feel like many will still be unhappy with this scene, but thankfully it's not how the true route ends. There's still a bit left after that scene, and all that stuff is perfect. The true route has 3 different endings, and all of them are stellar and feel fitting for the story in their own ways. The final battle and endings are genuinely beautiful, and elevated my opinion of the game as a whole significantly. Cutthroat Love has a small cast of characters, but I feel like each of them was used to their utmost. Unlike Maggot Bates and Dead Days, which felt like a couple of characters had squandered potential, everyone here has an important role to play in the story. The characters have a web of connections to each other, which made the criminal underworld of Kabukicho feel believable. The spread of information and rumors is an integral part of the narrative. One of the characters is even an information broker. The way this information spreads from one character to another feels believable because of this web of connections. Our nameless hitman protagonist is the restless sheep of the story. He suffers from a severe fear of death because of a trauma from his past. This intense thanatophobia renders him unable to sleep unless he kills someone. These acts of murder give him a sense of assurance and comfort knowing that he is capable of killing others, that he is a killer and not someone who is killed, that he can be a wolf and not merely a cowardly sheep. This all changes upon his fateful encounter with Azami. Dominating a natural killer like her in sex gives him the same comfort that murder does. This is why he keeps her around, despite disliking women. He is a fascinating character, so atypical for most other visual novel protagonists. He's already in his 30s and has this tired, detached personality that I find really charming. Years of insomnia and meaningless killing have left him weary. I love the way he reflects on his past in the sheep route, showing the incident that caused his fear of death and led to him becoming a hitman. Azami, on the other hand, is the wolf of the story. She may appear like a normal young woman on the surface, but make no mistake, she is an apex predator. For her, killing is as natural as breathing. It's chilling how casual she is about taking the lives of others. Her strength and speed border on the superhuman. Killing is easy for her. She only has one rule: she only kills bad people. Naturally, this rule is something the narrative calls into question. What does it mean to be a bad person when practically every character is a criminal, including her beloved Muraki? Yeah, it's a thinly veiled excuse for her homicidal tendencies. This is a girl who can't control her bloodlust, but tries to have standards and justifications. Aside from a murderous streak, she acts like an average girl. She gets excited over trivial things, has a romantic heart, and makes jokes. This makes her casual attitude towards murder even more unsettling. She's an extremely cool character and might be one of the best visual novel heroines ever. Her backstory is extremely dark and can be uncomfortable to sit through, but it's necessary to understand why she behaves the way she does. She falls head over heels for Muraki after attempting to kill him. This is because he's the first man to make her feel good during sex. The dynamic between the two is extremely interesting and compelling. Muraki treats her coldly and tries to keep her at arm's length. This is partially due to his misogyny, and belief that women get in the way of rational judgment of men, but he's also a bit scared of her. However, while he outwardly acts kinda mean, Azami gives him the internal peace of mind that he craves. Azami, in turn, acts super affectionately clingy towards Muraki, much to his chagrin. However, her love for Muraki does nothing to suppress her insatiable bloodlust. This tragic romance is the crux of the narrative, and is compelling in how it's explored in the routes. Both Muraki and Azami are fantastic characters on their own. They really shine in how they complement each other. While the main duo is superb, there's also the excellent supporting cast. Yun Shi-gu is the manager of a call girl service and former high-ranking member of the Chinese mafia. His glory days are long behind him, and he's just doing his best to scrape by in Kabukicho. Ekka's former boss, Li Jingrong, is now working under him as a driver, which puts him in a weird position where he often acts deferential towards the Li, even when he's supposed to be the boss. You can tell he's kind of bitter about his faction losing power in Kabukicho, but he knows there's nothing he can do about it. He's resigned himself to his work he doesn't enjoy. Yun is a fun character. If I were to make a Yakuza comparison, he kind of reminded me of Goro Majima. He even used to have a mad dog monk here. He has a history with Muraki. They have tried to kill each other in the past. In the present, there are more friendly terms and is a total bro in the story. He gets a lot of focus in the sheep route, where he plays a major role as he tries to relive his glory days and get back at the Yakuza. Mirai is Yun's daughter. She was raised by her mother, who divorced Yun, but now she wants to be more involved in her dad's life. It's clear that she grew up hearing stories about how cool her father used to be when he was a gangster. His current state is kinda sad, so she wants to remind him of the old days and bring back some of the ferocity of the mad dog. Due to being separated from her father for so long, and glorifying him, He has a weird electro complex. This extends to older men in general, like Meraki. Overall, Mirai is a surprisingly good character. I thought she'd be an average schoolgirl, but she adds a lot to the plot. I think her admiration of Yoon is charming, and I like how she brings out his softer side. She also develops a pretty sweet friendship with Azami. She's smart and strong-willed, but her idealization of the gangster lifestyle might put her and Yoon into danger, which is a big part of the sheep route. Mamoru Togi is the head of the Aoki Gathering, a Yakuza group that controls Kabukicho, which itself is a subsidiary of an even larger Yakuza organization, known as the S Gathering. He's cunning and ambitious, aiming to be the leader of the S Gathering, and will do anything to achieve that goal. He's also Maraki's employer, a beneficial relationship for the both of them. Meraki gets steady employment, while Togi gets a reliable assassin. Togi knows that Meraki needs him. After all, steady employment for a hitman is hard to come by, so he leverages that fact to get Meraki to do things he otherwise wouldn't. It's an interesting relationship. Togi is another character I didn't expect too much from. He has a purposefully unassuming design and presence. He looks like the kind of guy who get killed off first. However, he turned out to be one of the best written characters in the game. He's a total bastard that caused basically all the bad stuff that happens because of his insane ambitions. He's a schemer that doesn't expect people to like or understand him. He doesn't even bother trying to be someone that's admired. He's a man of few words that sees others as tools. That said, there are some interesting nuances to him and how he sees others. Like with Meraki, he uses him like a disposable tool, but also seems to have a degree of respect for him because he's good at his job and how similar they are. The sheep route draws some fascinating parallels between the two. Two men that are ultimately driven by the fear of death, something that everyone should be able to relate to in some way. Anyway, I really love Togi's character. He's a wonderful antagonist and plays his role perfectly. Kazuyoshi Mifune is Togi's rival in wanting to become the successor of the S Group chairman. While Togi is a calculated schemer, Mifune is more of an old-school Yakuza, big muscle man that loves drinking and is beloved by his subordinates. He is Togi's complete opposite. The only similarity is their ruthlessness. Mifune dislikes the idea of working under Togi. He broke off from the Yokai Gathering and formed his own faction, calling it the Mifune Group. Mifune is a really cool character in concept, which is why I wanted to see more of him. He's important to the plot, but he doesn't get to shine nearly as much as his rival Togi. They never even get to directly interact in the plot, but they're always scheming against each other. For such a tough-looking guy, Mifune doesn't get any cool action scenes either, which was slightly disappointing. I think the fan disc that I'll talk about later fixes this to an extent by giving him a bit more screen time. He's still a decent character. I particularly love the details that he's really into karaoke, which humanizes him quite a bit. Kensuke Kaida is Togi's right-hand man. He's young and resourceful, often doing little tasks or acting as a messenger. While he is part of Togi's faction, he also secretly works with Mifune and supplies him with information on Togi's activities. He's playing both sides, but not necessarily for his own gain. He genuinely loves them both and thinks they both be perfect leaders. He works to help them both, knowing that whoever ends up winning will undoubtedly be the best man to serve. I really enjoyed his character. The way he tries to play everyone is interesting and he's cute as hell. Haruhiko Nair is a wandering detective searching for a certain someone in Kabukicho. It's not even technically his jurisdiction, but he's there anyway. Nair has an unassuming design, but his presence is powerful. He's a Dirty Harry or Punisher style character, willing to take justice into his own hands to do what he believes needs to be done. Despite being a detective, he doesn't have a high opinion of the police. His work has left him disillusioned and frustrated by the inability of the police to enact justice. He's brutal. When you learn about what's truly motivating him, it makes him a somewhat funny character. Sayuki Ogai is another cop, but one much less self-righteous. He's a dirty cop that has no problem shaking people down for gambling money and working with the Yakuza. It wasn't always this way. Her backstory is very tragic. What's most interesting to me is her relationship with Mifune. She despises him because of an incident in her past, but he's pretty fond of her. He seems genuinely baffled at times by how coldly she treats him, though he does kinda deserve it. Still, he does seem to sincerely care for her in his own way. Oga is great overall. She has a strong spirit. Lady Dharma is the last character I'll talk about. She's a mysterious woman that suddenly shows up in Kabukicho with a score to settle up Togi. He's armed to the teeth with blade arms and machine gun legs. He hunts down Aokai Gathering members to get his attention and becomes a source of chaos in the story. Much like Izami, she's a wolf in the story. He's a very interesting character. Her motivation and relation to Togi are fascinating. They have complex feelings towards each other, to say the least. All in all, a spectacular cast of characters. There's a couple I didn't really mention, but some things are better experienced. In spite of most of the cast being criminals or morally dubious folk, the narrative does an excellent job at making them sympathetic and understandable. Yet the story will remind you that they are still capable of absolute brutality. It's a delicate balance to reach, but Cutthroat Love does it perfectly. I also appreciate how diverse the cast is. Not everyone is Japanese, you get representation from Chinese and Taiwanese immigrants as well. The women are also all really strong and cool. You may be wondering about the arrow content. This is ClockUp after all, known for including stuff like Guru. I have to say, Cutthroat Love probably strikes the best balance between arrow and narrative in any ClockUp title I've experienced. There are several H scenes, but they didn't feel as annoyingly disruptive as Maggot Bates, Euphoria, or Dead Days. You can read for a while without encountering any arrow, and what's there is relevant to the narrative, usually in showcasing the relationship between Azami and Muraki. The scenes in Azami's flashbacks could be a bit much, but they are important to her story. The H scenes are for the most part vanilla and consensual, yet there are still 2 brutal gang rape scenes. In addition, there's one horrific Goro scene that feels straight out of Maggot Bates. It's short and a well-justified part of the story, but it might upset people. Cutthroat Love is not for the faint of heart. There is an option to censor the gore, like always, which is good for those sensitive to such things. Shifting gears a bit, Kuroshiki's technical skill at writing battle scenes has always impressed me. You can tell this guy really loves martial arts with how much detail he puts into the different grapples and moves the characters do. Fights in Cutthroat Love, while lacking the grandiose chuny flair of the battles of Maggot Bates, makes up for it by going for a more grounded approach. Muraki, while being a trained killer, is not actually that powerful. He excels at instantly killing his targets with surprise attacks. The more upright fights have him struggling. He uses his wits and cowardly sheep instincts to survive. Azami, however, is a total monster in battle. She gets by with sheer brute force and her trusty knife, all thanks to her abnormally powerful body. Her battles are awesome because she can do insane feats that nobody else can. The battles are all thrilling and detailed, without them dragging on overly long. The narrative employs shifts in perspective, much like Dead Days. While the story does center around Muraki and Azami, the narrative also thoroughly explores how other characters think. While very rare, I love the occasions where it did shift to Togi's perspective because it's difficult to tell what's truly going on in his head from an outside perspective. Togi's perspective was also quite interesting because I enjoyed seeing more of her character. Moving on to the technical details, Cutthroat Love is a phenomenal looking visual novel. Norizane was the main artist, just like in Dead Days. I think her work here is even better than Dead Days. The coloring is vibrant, which I think fits the setting of Kabukicho. The backgrounds are equally fitting, being edited pictures of the famous red light district. The way they're edited and stylized makes these backgrounds look rad. There's a good amount of CGs, many of which aren't even for H scenes. One of my big problems for previous ClockUp games is the lack of normal CGs, in comparison to how many there were for H scenes. But that's not really a problem here. All the CGs are stellar, especially the battle ones. The music is all reused from Maggot Bates. While I do enjoy the royalty-free music, especially the rock music that plays during fights, I once again have to say I wish they could get a composer to make original music. It would make their game stand out more. After hearing the same tracks in Maggot Bates, Leaked, Dead Days, and now Cutthroat Love, it does get slightly stale. There is one original song made for the game, that's the opening song, Dance of the Wolf. While a banger on its own, the lyrics are meaningful to the story. They basically spout the relationship between Azami and Muraki, and how their relationship will inevitably end. It's an incredible opening, both in visuals and in music. If there's one thing I have to complain about, it's the English translation. I noticed a number of odd typos while reading. One or two I could forgive, but they are so frequent that it got a little distracting and took me out of the experience a bit. You can still tell what the characters are saying, but the spelling or grammar could be a bit off. Like one time Mifune's name was spelled wrong. I have to assume this is due to a lack of editing, maybe a rush job because of deadlines or something like that. It's unfortunate because the visual novel itself is immaculate. These small errors drag it down ever so slightly. In the time since it was released, it doesn't seem like these typos have been fixed or addressed at all. It makes me wonder if it was just a me problem somehow. Thematically, Cutthroat Love has a lot to say about society and love. Kuroshiki has had obvious anti-authoritarian views that I had noticed in Maggot Bates, where he heavily implied that cops were violent thugs. Cutthroat Love goes even harder into these views, implying that real Japanese politicians are criminals. I thought the way the narrative frames Kabukicho as a red light district where the light has grown dim was fascinating. It was well past the days where it was an obvious hotbed of illegal activity because of how the government cracked down on the Yakuza with anti-organized crime laws. It reminds me a lot of how Kamurocho is characterized in Yakuza 6, versus how it was in its heyday in Yakuza 0. The government has made the area more presentable on the surface, but at what cost? You could also say a theme here is the changing of the times. You see characters like Yoon reflecting on those glorious days in the past and how much things have changed. You think that the government would be seen as more positive like compared to the Yakuza, but the plot explores ideas like institutionalized power and corruption. Those politicians in power aren't much different than the Yakuza. The only difference is the government is a much larger and more powerful entity. The story humanizes these criminals, making them sympathetic while also making these faceless politicians into ruthless monsters. Furthermore, the story also explores how people rationalize violence. Azami, of course, has a rule of only killing bad people, but that's just an excuse for violent tendencies. Much like Shogo and Maggot Bates, who believed that all the violence he enacts and clearly enjoys was okay, as long as he had justice on his side. Meraki needs to kill people in order to sleep because of his fear of death. The story does have an interesting take on death, and it's absurd how people can die at any time for no real reason at all. It happens randomly and unexpectedly. It's terrifying, isn't it? If people could continue on, knowing that they could easily die at any time is crazy. Beneath all the dark, pessimistic writing, there's ultimately a sincere story of love. Just like in Maggot Bates, this theme of love is strong and resonant. I think the way love acts as a salvation to Meraki and Azami is what makes the story so compelling. That about sums up my thoughts on Restless Sheep and the Lone Wolf. But we're not done quite yet. Not only do we get the original game, Shirobune also translated the fan-disc side stories, Woolly Eyes Gaiden, releasing them both at the same time. So let me talk about the Gaiden a bit. Woolly Eyes Gaiden is comprised of 5 stories that are linked together and takes place sometime between the end of the common route and the beginning of the true route. In it, you see more of Meraki and Azami's various misadventures in Kabukicho. It's really nice seeing the characters in more mundane scenarios, without the pressure of the plot or people trying to kill them. There's some amusingly silly ideas here, like having Azami and Mirai become YouTube stars or a baseball competition between Togi and Mifune. I loved seeing more of these characters that I had grown attached to, and seeing familiar faces in a different light. Like I said before, Mifune got more chances to interact with other characters and do stuff, which I greatly appreciated. I think my favorite sequence here is a confrontation between Azami and Lady Dharma, the 2 wolves of Kabukicho. It's something I kept expecting to happen in the main story, and never did, but they finally got a short fight here. Kurashiki takes the opportunity to give more of his social commentary on things like YouTubers and the strange relationships they can have with their audience. I loved how the final chapter was about memory and identity, as Meraki gets amnesia and has to rediscover himself. Usually I hate amnesia arcs like that, but I thought it was executed well here. It was a really sweet way to end it. All in all, Woolly Eyes Gaiden is absolutely worth reading if you enjoyed the original visual novel and want more time with the characters. It's short and relatively cheap, so there's no harm in playing it after the original game. I've said everything I need to about Restless Sheep and Lone Wolf. In summary, it's an amazing story that I would recommend to anyone that enjoys crime drama or dark stories. It's a thrilling, thoughtful, and heartfelt story of love between a deadly wolf and a cowardly sheep. I'd have to say that I would still consider Maggot Bates to be Kuroshiki's magnum opus. It's a very special story to me and hits like few things do. I think that Jane Doe and Shiban are better antagonists than the villains here. However, Cutthroat Love is a very close second best ClockUp visual novel. It is superior in some ways. Like, I think the true endings are a bit stronger and the cast overall is better utilized. It's certainly better than Dead Days, which I still enjoyed. I implore people to buy Cutthroat Love and support the official release. There's still one more Kuroshiki ClockUp VM that hasn't been translated. The newest one, Ojo no Shima. It looks awesome, so I hope it gets translated sometime soon. If you want to buy Cutthroat Love, you can find the game on Steam, Joran, the Jazz Store, Manga Gamer, GOG, basically anywhere you can buy visual novels. Same is true of Woolly Eyes Gaiden. If you get it on Steam, make sure to get the patch off the Shirobune website so you get the complete uncensored experience. If you made it this far, thanks for watching.